and our experience with brokers was pretty bad. In fact, whenever I used to have long assignments, for example in Calcutta, I had a long assignment, so my wife also basically shifted there for that period of time to Gao, and we had a horrible experience with brokers. Yes, there are some great, amazing brokers also, but because this field does not have any entry barrier, right? At least for advising a client about taxes, you need to have a degree, you need to perhaps have BSCA, you need to be a doctor to give any medical advice. But to give advice about which house you should take, and when you are making such a big amount of money, there is no entry barrier. So the grocery guy, the pan wala is also basically a part-time broker. And because the entry barrier is zero, people are doing it part-time, and their main objective is to close a deal. Because you just need to have one phone number, connect 2 3 people over WhatsApp, get the client, and get everything in cash.
This is Siddharth Alwalia. Welcome to the 100x Entrepreneur Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Prime Venture Partners, an early stage VC fund led by Amit Somani, Shripati Acharya, and Sanjay Swami. Prime is often the first institutional investor in category creating tech startups in fintech, SaaS, healthcare, and education such as MoneyTap, Happy, Mfine. To know more about Prime, visit primevp.in. Today, I have with me Amit Agarwal, founder of No Broker. Amit, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Siddharth.
To give all of us a background, No Broker is the largest C2C real estate platform in India with 1.2 crores, that is 10 million customers. And No Broker is eliminating brokers and agents in real estate transactions with a tech based approach. They help owners and seekers save more than 90% of the transaction cost. So, Amit, I would love to start with, before diving into how you raised $151 million dollars of venture capital and built the India's largest platform in no brokerage. And this is a new concept altogether. I would like to start with your journey growing up, right? Your family, everything before, starting no broker.
Sure. So my father was a civil servant, and he was posted in UP, and hence because of his job, we kept on shifting cities every 2 to 3 years. So I think when you shift a lot of cities, either you become too introvert or you become too extrovert. So I moved towards becoming more extrovert because I had to change schools every 1 to 3 years and make new friends, adjust to a new school and so on. And so a lot of my schooling was done in Agra, which was 10th and 12th. And then, as it was prevalent at that point of time, and to some extent even today, that if you get good marks in 10th, and my 10th exam went well, so I was among the top 20 in the entire state in the board exam. So hence it was understood that okay, because you are good in studies, so which means you need to either choose engineering or be a doctor. And then I basically aimed for IIT and then went to IIT Kanpur, studied there for 4 years, and then joined like everybody else. Uh, then again there were two options: either going outside and study, giving GRE, or do a job here. Then followed by MBA. So I gave GRE. I got into a good university in US to pursue MS, because I was the batch topper, and again it was quite prevalent that if you are among good in studies, then you basically go for further studies. But then I realized that I am perhaps following too much what everybody else is doing, and do I really see myself pursuing MS or pursuing PhD, or just like everybody else switching into computer science? Then I realized that I am more interested in business rather than pursuing further studies in engineering. So I said, let me do a job for a couple of years and then pursue MBA, which I did. So worked in Cognizant, and then aimed for CAT, and luckily it worked. And then I went to IIM Ahmedabad, 2 years there.
And what after IIM Ahmedabad?
So after IIM Ahmedabad, I was interested in management consulting. It seemed to be something which is pretty challenging, and I joined PwC Management Consulting, and I loved it. So in consulting, either you just burn out in 2 years, 3 years, because it's you are traveling every you're getting up early Monday morning at 3:34, taking a flight, and then coming, taking the last flight on a Friday night and coming at 2 in the night, because the Friday night flight, and I tell you, it always gets delayed. So either you burn out in 2 years or you enjoy. So I think the thing which I enjoyed most was that the general that our CEO would give an assignment that, okay, you need to reduce costs, you need to improve customer service, you need to find ways to improve revenue. But then when you land up at the shop floor, the place where people are working, and I was in banking and financial services, so there, most of the people will be hostile because their boss has asked them to ask this new group of guys, youngsters, to do some work, and they have no idea how this business is done, and they are just going to see our watch and tell us the time, which, as a popular joke goes about management consulting. So working very hard, figuring out what is the improvement area in their business, turning that hostile environment into an environment in which they feel that, no, these guys are well-meaning and they are just trying to improve our business, was a thrill and was a challenge that really excited me. So I worked in management consulting for almost 10 years. Uh, and then after that, I joined ANZ Bank, which was Australia New Zealand Bank, as head of strategy, reporting to the CEO of the country.
So you're not in India at that point in time?
No, I was in India. ANZ Bank had recently come to India. This was around 2012. They had come to India just a couple of years back, again back in India. So I joined that.
So, Amit, like most, there's a concept in startups that most people start startups at very young age. So, if I may ask, at what age you started No Broker?
Yeah, so I think I was 34, 35 years old. So, of course, now even today I see lots of guys who are in late 30s. But yes, at that point of time, I was one of the few.
So when going to VC pitches at their offices, you would have seen like a lot of younger folks, even fourth year IITians, sitting in the lobby along with you.
No, of course. So I think the general perception at that point of time was that a lot of youngsters are doing startups, and the chances of a youngster being successful is perhaps a little bit higher. Uh, uh, and the way in which I thought about myself was because ANZ Bank was such a comfortable job in terms of very good salary, very posh bank, good working hours, that it felt that if I continue from here, the only thing which I'm going to chase is, okay, a bigger designation or more money and perhaps an overseas posting. So then there's that path, right? And that path, once you take on that path, then you can perhaps rarely come back and leave all of it and take a risk and become an entrepreneur. So I felt that if I don't leave a job, then perhaps I'll never be able to do it, because once you are earning well, then you inevitably you take mortgage, you take one more house, you want to invest there, and then it's a golden handcuff.
Yeah.
uh, so from that perspective, from that age, and from the timing, it was a very bad timing, because we were expecting our second kid. So my wife Priyanka, she is my batchmate from IIT Kanpur. So we were expecting a second kid, and she of course wanted to take a year off, and me doing startup basically meant that she had to join early, because at least one person needs to earn. So that perspective, it was perhaps the worst time. But what I felt was that unless I do something of my own now, perhaps I will never be able to do it. And the mental trick which I used to fool myself or persuade myself was that, see, I have around what, 25 years left to work more, and what if I give only 10 percentage of that? So 2 years if I give to startup, and if I earn nothing, and even if I blow out the savings which I have, I still have 90 percentage of my career left. So won't that cover it? And if I don't take risk now, then when? So I think that's the mental trick which I used to jump into entrepreneurship.
To convince yourself and your wife.
Yeah.
And so it was a 10-year professional journey before starting up, roughly
Yeah.
8 years at PwC and 2 years at ANZ.
Yeah. And plus pre MBA experience. So yeah,
Yeah.
almost. Good.
So how did you finalize the idea of no broker when you and how did you find your co-founder?
Yeah, so basically, me, Akhil, and Saurabh, we three started No Broker. Saurabh had thought of the name nobroker.com, and he had registered the nobroker.com domain many, many years back. Uh, and we three, as individuals, we three were had experienced brokers because me and Saurabh had lived in Bombay, Akhil had lived in Bangalore, and we had shifted houses, and our experience with brokers was pretty bad. In fact, whenever I used to have long assignments, for example in Calcutta I had a long assignment, so my wife also basically shifted there for that period of time, and we took a house, and we had a horrible experience with brokers. Yes, there are some great amazing brokers also, but because this field does not have any entry barrier, right? At least for advising a client about taxes, you need to have a degree, you need to perhaps have BSCA, you need to be a doctor to give any medical advice. But to give advice about which house you should take, and when you are making such a big amount of money, there is no entry barrier. So the grocery guy, the pan wala is also basically a part-time broker. And because the entry barrier is zero, people are doing it part-time, and their main objective is to close a deal, because you just need to have one phone number, connect two three people over WhatsApp, get the client, and get everything in cash. There's no income tax that you need to pay. So which has attracted a lot of people who are in there for quick bucks, which
Yeah.
makes customer experience very bad. So all three of us had experienced that customer service, the ability of guiding a broker is pretty bad, and if you put it in context of the money that they're taking, then it is purely unacceptable. And we just couldn't figure out why is it so that it is not being done anywhere else in the world, that people are just trying to shortcut the broker and connect both the parties directly with each other. So that we surely couldn't understand as to why it is not happening. So I think that was how this germinated, and that's how all three of us came together.
And what was the first version of No Broker like? Was it an app? Was it is it currently, or was it just a plain website, or was it a yellow pages?
So it was a plain website, and you'll be surprised to know in today's age that early on we thought perhaps app is not something which will work. So uh, it's not very well, it's what, it's basically 6 7 years back that we are talking, but at that point of time, today app is basically omnipresent, and you can't think of anything without an app. But at that point of time we thought that perhaps this is something that people will use it once in a year, once in 2 years. So isn't a website, isn't a mobile friendly website sufficient enough? Would you have, why would you need an app? Or perhaps even if you need an app, perhaps couple of years down the line. Of course, thankfully we launched app, and we are not late about it. But the initial version was a simple website, uh, a very clean website, which we try to maintain even today, trying to connect owners and tenants directly with each other.
So do you remember the year and the month when you launched the first version of the website?
Yes, so we launched it in March 2014.
2014.
Yes.
So it's almost been 7 years. More, and how can you share like how did you build the initial traction and at what point you approached the various VCs?
So we started approaching VCs very early on, because from this IIM connections, we had some couple of friends who were already in the VC industries. So we started sounding it off with them, uh, uh, and of course, the effort became more serious the moment couple of months passed away after launching the website, because we came to know that this is a very competitive industry, where there are very large players in the industry who have been there for a very long time, and if you really want to make a difference and get a decent set of customers, then you need to have a good amount of traction, because this is a network effect sort of business, right? The more tenants you have, the more owners will come and post their property, and more owners you have and more properties you have, more tenants will come, and the same thing basically holds true for buy and sell also. So we realized early on that we need to get funding, and just our pool savings will not be sufficient. So that's when we started approaching investors.
And if you can share the initial set of challenges, right, including the funding challenges, the traction challenges, which you faced while building No Broker.
So in terms of the traction, I think the traction has was always good given the amount of money that we had and that we were spending because we bootstrapped for almost a year. So I would say the traction from the customers was good uh, because many customers wrote that yes, this is exactly what we have been waiting for: how to avoid a broker and how to connect directly. Because people are making those small Facebook groups and trying to basically jump the broker and connect directly. So that was anyway happening in the society to some extent. Uh, with investors, I think we faced huge amount of challenge, and the reason was that everybody asked us that okay, so you have nobroker.com. Tell us what is the US equivalent of this, or tell us what is the China equivalent of this. Now there is no US equivalent. There is no China equivalent. So we are not a copy of any other company which has been famous outside, and we are not copying that concept. And although it is being said in the general in the VC industry that they love to take risk and love to put money behind new ideas, but actually they don't. They need to return money to their own investors, and they would like to take a bet on something which has a higher probability of success. Uh, so earlier we faced huge resistance. People ask if no brokerage was such a good idea, then why isn't there a large company in US or China? No, we had no answer. We don't know why there is not a large company. Perhaps the context is different. In US, it's a regulated industry. You need to clear an exam, and there is accountability to a broker. Uh, in China, there are large branded chain of physical brokers, physical shops, which is not there in India. So there is no answer to it. Apart from saying that, hey, we don't know about that, but we know about India. And in
Yeah.
India, people in general don't like broker. And so when we will ask a VC whether you like a broker,
Hmm.
they invariably say, yeah, oh, we don't love it at least. But why has it not worked somewhere else? One was this big challenge, and second big challenge was that how can you collect money from customers upfront? Because see, a broker can always arm twist and collect money from you after the deal. You can't basically say no to him. But if you are a platform and you want to collect money from the customer before the deal is done, because you can't chase him after a deal is done, then this is something which has never been done anywhere else in the world. So nowhere else in the world has a real estate platform taken money from the customer before the deal is consummated. Which was also another question. To which our response was that if the website is successful, if you are able to close a lot of deals, then of course then customer would feel much more comfortable paying money upfront because he knows that it has worked in other instances. But yes, that was something which was not being done before.
How many VCs would you have approached?
I think we must have approached every VC in the town. Must have approached at least 20-25 VCs. And so I think almost everybody said, looks interesting, come back, show us more data. And then there was this big company, housing.com, which got a mega funding $90 million at that point of time, which is a very big amount. Now, when I look back at it, Mm, I realized that even more as to how big that amount was. So we were in conversation with three VCs who were in the end who were very bullish and who wanted to basically invest, and we reached the valuation stage, valuation discussion stage with them. But the moment Economic Times printed that news about housing.com, everybody just vanished because they said now we don't want to put money in this sector because another guy has got such a huge corpus. But then thankfully, SAF Partners, which is now known as Elevation Partners, they are the ones who really trusted, and they felt that they should take some risk with us, which they did. Uh,
And how big was the first check?
so the first check was 18 crores, $3 million, and which basically came into two tranches, 1 million and then 2 million. And this basically deal was finalized in early 2015. So till then we had no office, and that was a time when we first of all started with one office.
And what would have been the traction back then, if you remember, on how many houses were listed on No Broker, which all cities was No Broker present in, and how many customers were visiting?
So no broker basically had was in two cities, Bombay and Bangalore, and I think the number of listings would be barely thousand in a month, thousand 500 in the months, in the month. Yeah.
So, you one unconventional thing is right when everybody in your sector was burning money. Uh, Housing was there, common floor was there, which was very prominent. You choose a very conservative approach. What was the reason for that?
Uh, so this is a good question because at that point of time, many of the companies which were there and they were very good. So Common Floor, Housing, Grab House, all three amazing founders, very solid founders, very good company, very good brand that they were building. Uh, and so if you see from that perspective, it was impossible to imagine as to how can we beat them. So we thought that let's forget about beating anybody. We can only focus on ourselves and perhaps hope that the market is big enough for multiple players, because these are good companies, these are good founders. We can just focus on ourselves. So let's stop looking at others. And everybody had raised so much money, and even when they had raised money equal to us, they were spending a lot. Uh, so so I remember basically getting down from the airport and seeing that the Meru car is covered with branding of one company, and adjoining billboard is covered with the ad of another company. And we were figuring out as to how can they make money, because real estate, see, if you have huge amount of, if I show you right now, if I show you the world's best ad to shift a house, will you shift a house?
No.
You will not, because there's a 1 by 12th chance that if you shift a house every year, 1 by 12 chance that you will be in that month today. So what is more important is that I need to be in your memory for a longer time horizon, so that whenever the time comes, you think about us. Spending money like crazy, this is not e-commerce where you will order another pair of jeans because there's a discount going on a jeans, right? So, and we figured out, and we saw that at the size that we were in, it made much more sense to do BTL rather than do ATL, because the ROI was much higher. So we basically viewed every activity as an ROI. Am I getting more customers by doing this activity? And I know there's a human element also to this. See, if you have just raised funds, you get a lot of congratulatory messages from your friends. If you have a big newspaper ad, 10 people call you and say how happy they are to see the ad. It feels good as a human being. But as a businessman, is it a good choice? And we felt no, it is not. So we has said that we are going to be very frugal, because this industry has seen a lot of graveyard because of not being frugal and spending money too quickly. So we said we are going to be very frugal. We don't care how everybody else is operating. We are going to spend money as slowly as we can and as effectively as we can. So I remember that even after having 18 crores in the bank, we did not take a corporate office. We took a building, and in that building also, sorry, we took a house with kitchen and everything. And within that also, when it was summer, we did not buy any AC. And our investor was like, come on, you can afford AC. But he said no. We are going to save every penny that we can. It's better to put that money into the business rather than anywhere else.
And was any of the three or four competitors doing similar to what No Broker was doing, or they were more like broker led, the transactions which were happening on them?
So grabhouse.com, which was founded by another very good founder, they were doing exactly what we were doing, and they were ahead of us by, I would say, 6 months, with the bigger numbers, even more famous investors backing them. So they were even ahead of us, and yeah.
But common floor in housing at that point in time were focused more on the brokerage side of.
Correct. But the question which investor used to ask us that tomorrow they can also focus on non-brokerage, right? So how do you answer that? So we said, yeah, of course, everybody can focus on non-brokerage. But at that point of time, most of the players felt that brokers are an important part of the chain and it makes sense to always include them and make money from them. While we felt that reaching directly to the consumer's pocket gives you a bigger revenue pool, and hence basically it makes sense to attack that directly because it puts more money in customers' pocket.
And everybody was expanding like crazy at that point in time. Remember 2015, 16, 17 time frame. What was the reason that you never expanded that fast?
So I think this was a question which our teammates used to ask us most, and I still remember the guys who in my office used to ask me every few days as to why are we not opening more cities. Uh, and our simple reason was that, see, even investors, many of the investors ask us as to why, when are you going to add one more city? And we felt that adding more city is also another vanity metric because it gives you a feeling of aha that you are expanding, you have become a larger company, bigger company. But for a moment, just think about from a customer's point of view. As a customer, you don't care whether we are in Ranchi or whether we are in Vishakhapatnam. You just care that right now the street on which you are searching a house is the house available or not. If I'm not able to do a good job on that, then you don't care as a customer in how many cities am I. So our question was that why shouldn't we do better in the city that we are already in rather than basically going to a new city. First of all, our market share in the given city should be decent, customer experience should be decent, and moreover, when you expand more and more cities, it puts a huge amount of pressure in terms of your finances because every new city will consume a lot of money. First of all, to make you establish there, and then some revenue will start flowing in. And many of the investors basically took this copy paste model from the e-commerce model, but e-commerce model is different, right? There, if you have to, you just need to tie with a logistics partner, and then you can open up Meerut, you can open up Patna because the partner will deliver that goods. But in our case, you need to be physically the houses should be physically made available in that city. So we could see that this is a mistake which many of the startups are doing of expanding too fast before gaining decent market share in the city that they are in. So so we said no to it. In hindsight, this seemed to work well.
So how long were you in Mumbai and Bangalore? Uh,
So in Mumbai and Bangalore, I think we were there for almost 2 years before we expanded to more cities, and then we slowly expanded to 4 5 cities more. But it was very gradual and very thought after. It was never hurried.
when everybody was spending, huge on branding, what was your customer acquisition strategy for the first 3 years, right? Even when once you had 18 crores in your bank.
So see, our strategy was more focused towards BTL. That instead of putting billboard ad, can I put a no parking board? Can I put an ad on the behind an auto? So why should I spend 50,000 rupees on a billboard if I can spend 200 rupees, 10 rupees on the back of an auto? Perhaps it will give me more visibility. So and of course, Facebook, Google gives you a very good ROI in terms of actually knowing how many customers came in. So I think it is also at different stages. When you are very small, it makes sense to go more for BTL because the ROI is very high there. Now, when we have become bigger, of course, now we know that now at given our size, we need to have TV ads. So for the past couple of years, we regularly do TV ads and we do billboards. So that we do. My only point is that you, that we did not copy and try to do TV ad too prematurely when we knew that the other less expensive mediums will give us better ROI. So we let the ROI decide rather than the vanity metric or a copy pasting of others decide.
And you had only two models of revenue. You were charging the customers, uh, for example, in different plans of no broker, starting at 1800 rupees, which goes up to 6000 rupees. And in some cases, you were also charging the house owner for premium services, right? How long did you keep this model?
So the model is still there now. So no broker is basically a freemium website. So you can come to no broker site, you can search for properties for free, you can post properties for free, there is no charge. But for value added services, if you want more options, if you want premium filters, if you want uh, uh, a relationship manager helping you. If you want your phone number to be hidden, then we have different payment plans. And we launched our payment plan very early on. So some people thought that we are going to take a year or so before we year or 2 year before we start monetizing. But I think after establishing office, it just took us 7 or 8 months when we said, hey, we want to start charging. We might just get 10 rupees, but we want to charge something. Because otherwise we were very fearful that are we just is the concept just going to catch fire, catch importance. We could see that customers are increasing, but we wanted to be sure that are we going to make money, or is it just going to be more and more customers like many other listed platform did with no money inside. Because see, in Indian context, uh, moving from a customer who is paying 0 rupees to who is paying 1 rupee is a very big move. But from 1 rupee to 100 rupees is not a big move at all. If a customer has taken out his wallet and if he's ready to pay 1 rupee, he will pay you 10 rupees. But when you shift from free to paid, even when it is optionally paid, only some customers we charge, rest of the customers still use for free. But you need to learn a lot. Customers suddenly become much more demanding. You need to have your services much more sharper. Everything changes the moment you start charging money. Everything changes the moment you are just doing it for free. You are under cool startup. Everything is fine. And that's one when you are really tested. That are you really that good.
So, Amit, you mentioned that it was a very different journey when the customer shifts from a free to a paid customer. And currently, let's say among the 1.2 crore user base, what's the percentage between the free and the paid?
So our even today 90-95 percentage of the customers in different categories we allow for free, and the rest basically pays. So the percentage varies for different products and services. Uh, uh, but the great thing is that because it's a tech-based platform, so the cost of the free customers of getting the free customers is very low, and the amount, and because we don't have physical people on the field, our cost base continues to be on the lower side comparatively, and hence the model basically makes sense. So the objective has always been that if we can save more and more money, then it means that we can pass more and more benefits to customer.
But your competitors were doing so many things. Your investors would also be saying to you, Amit, why don't you do this? Why don't you try this? Uh, what was your reply to them?
So, I think it was just perseverance. We three as a nature we don't like to argue a lot. So I think we just always with our. I think we have also been very lucky to get investors who are very understanding. So so I think when so we just basically followed an approach in which we try to tell them this is what the business reality is, uh, and we have this much of money. We don't want to copy others to burn like crazy. We want to focus on getting customers. We want to focus early on revenue, and most of the things make common sense. And we also pointed out towards the lot of failures which has happened in this industry because of not following these commonsensical rules. So I would say that in hindsight, I think we were just lucky to have very good investors. BNext and SAF, they are awesome, amazing investors. Uh, they don't interfere at all. They guide when it is required, and they have huge faith. Uh, Peru has basically from BNext has helped us like crazy. Has used his own personal connections to get us funding when the times were tough. So I think that way we have been blessed to get good supporters.
And what was the time period when you raised your second round after SAF? Like, and was there any challenges raising the round after SAF?
So after SAF, I think the next 3-4 years were very challenging. So I would be honest here that until basically from 2015 to I would say 2019, those 4 years were very tough. See, the reason was that earlier people were not giving us funding, saying that hey, other players have raised huge amount of funds. So how are you going to compete with them? And the moment a couple of these large players got in trouble, then the question became that hey, there looks to be some problem in the industry. There looks to be some problem in the industry, so we are not going to invest. Now, how do you answer such a vague insight? Tell me what's the problem. Look at, see, we can only show you our numbers. We can only show you the traction that we are getting, the acceptance that customers are giving to this concept, and we can tell you that we are not repeating the mistakes which others might have done. That's all that we can do at our end. But I think so many Indian investors had burned their fingers investing in real estate startups. Unfortunately, just a matter of, I think, time, that everybody was became super cautious. So wherever we went, we said, "Yeah, numbers looks good," but no, not interested. So I think at that point of time, two things which happened well was that SAF continued to, uh, and Mayank Khanduja is our board member. They continued to support us, and Teru from B Next, he basically reached out to his contacts in Singapore and Japan and got those funding. We tried a lot in other countries. We basically got hold of a South Korean investor, and somehow over 1 year we convinced him that we are doing the job that we aim to do, and then they invested. So somehow we basically managed to get couple of million bucks every year or so, and managed to basically continue to grow slowly and survive. So I think
And
that was the case when the
how much
market.
was the second and third round of funding?
So the second and third round of funding was basically through the South Korean investor. One round was through him, and another round was through BNext friends, which were in Singapore and Japan. So these second and third round of funding
So
basically happened.
combined, it would have been 5-6 million in total, not more than that.
So we raised $3 million, then $7 million, and then $10 more million. So we raised $20 million in the first 5 years of our journey. But of course, it was a pittance compared to what other people had raised in this industry.
So, did you at any time feel, right, have I entered the wrong space? Because other people have raised so much, and am I doing something wrong here? People are not giving me money in spite of customer growth.
Somehow, that I think as a founder, you are always trying to basically uh, solve what is being thrown at you. So what was being thrown at us was that, okay, Indian investors are not interested, foreign investors are slightly interested, and they are giving you some money. So we responded by saying that, okay, we are going to respect this money, we are going to spend a lot, we are going to spend less, and we are just going to focus more and more on monetization, and more in terms of expanding where which can be future seeds of monetization. So and everything, so we, as a philosophy, we generally don't go after sexy product features. We don't. Our objective is that we are going to do what customers are telling us, so we are very shameless in that manner. We are just going to learn from customer. Our entire game is to just keep our ears to the ground, listen to what customers are saying, and just copy that. So if customers are saying, we want Hyderabad city, we will launch Hyderabad. If customers are saying, why are you doing only residential, can't you launch commercial, we'll launch commercial. So we have been just basically listening to customers and also monetizing them, so that we don't end up creating a huge company in terms of customers, which and have no idea as to how to monetize, because it takes a huge amount of time. At least for us, it took a huge amount of time to really figure out how to make a customer happy, charge him upfront and make him happy. And it's an ongoing journey because customers keep on evolving and they keep on becoming more demanding every month, every year. Yeah.
And when did the large growth rounds by Tiger and General Atlantic happened?
This happened in year 2019 and 2020. So first of all, Shantanu from General Atlantic, those were the guys who basically saw that this is a platform which is doing well, and they felt that this approach is right, and this basically can be something which can become big, and the revenue pool is bigger. So they invested in 2018, 19, and after a few months, then we met Tiger guys, and they invested. And then in 2020, GA did one more round to increase their stake. So then, basically, suddenly from a $20 million in 5 years, suddenly $130 million more in next less than 1 year, was something which basically gave us a lot more fuel than we had earlier received.
And one thing which you shared with me offline was that, for every decision, that you could have failed, you said that if I fail, I'll fail in a way that I'm most comfortable with.
Yeah. So see, because there's so much dilemma and many a times at strategic level that see, many companies have flourished because they have been frugal. But there are also in lots of instances where companies have failed because they were frugal at the wrong point of time and their competitors were spending and expanding like crazy, and which is how they basically attracted most of the customers and investors and employees and so on and so forth. The problem, so I have generally I was good in studies, but the good thing in studies is that you know that you need to read a book, and if you are good at it, you will crack the exam. But in business, there is no set rule. Based on the context, things change a lot, and hence it was obvious to us, and it will always be obvious to us that there are 100 ways to fail, 100 ways to die. So we basically thought to ourselves that what am I most comfortable with? Tomorrow, if nobroker.com shuts down, am I comfortable with the way in which we have died? Or so we felt that we are most comfortable with the approach in which we are saving money, in which we are being frugal, in which we are charging customers faster than later. That's our approach, and not doing something which is more sexy looking for investors, but doing something which is much more on the ground, benefiting customers, and so that we can monetize more. So we said we are going to use some basic commonsensical rules. They may not work, but this is how we are happy to die. Even if we die, at least we will be at peace that okay, we followed what common sense told us or what we felt is the right approach. Yeah. So
One more anecdote you shared was, let's say, if the three founders were traveling to a foreign city, you used to take a single hotel room and put an extra bed.
so that we continued doing for a very very long time, because we because we went to many, we went to Japan, we went to Singapore, we went to South Korea to raise funds, and many a times it involved two visits because you need the IC, then you need one more time, and so on. And of course, if you see from a logical point of view, you have couple of crores in the bank, so it doesn't matter whether you take one room or two room. But I think our general approach became that we need to save every money that we can and spend it on getting more customer, but not spend on ourselves. So we'll with three of us will go to a country and we'll take a double bedroom and we'll ask one extra bed to be put and we'll manage. So yeah, so that we kept on doing for many years.
And at what point of time you started expanding more services?
So this is a revelation which basically happened in middle of our journey, where we realized that so we were very very, I'm not sure if it was good or not, but we are very very internal focused. So we will not check any computer websites for months and months because we felt that even if we check and even if we see what they are doing, what's how it's going to change us. We are anyway going to do what we are doing, and because our model is different, so we have to pursue our own path. So let's, what's the point of being biased by seeing what others are doing? So not because uh, we thought we are right, but because practically speaking our journey is different, right? We are eliminating broker, so we need to chase our own thing. So that we kept on doing, and then we realized that because we are eliminating broker, we are connecting both the customers directly with each other, owner seller, owner buyer, and tenant and property landlord. So we realized that because we are actually reaching at the moment of truth when the customer is closing the deal, and customer is not basically, it's not a broker who has taken away the deal. We are there on the website itself. So we can give these services like packers and movers and painting and cleaning, and these are very unorganized industry, right? Because how many branded players are there? Handful of branded players, and customers are anyway searching for a curated player, curated vendor who can give them this service. So we said that we should offer it. Now here again, nobody else is offering. At least not at that point. Nobody else was offering these home ancillary services. But we felt that this is what customers were asking us. So customer asked us that, hey, I understand that you will get us a house, but who will do the rental agreement? Because a broker typically helps with the rental agreement. So if you are not doing rental agreement, then who will do? So we said, okay, we are going to do rental agreement. So I think all of these services came from customers' uh, demand and whatever customer told us, and slowly we became very good at it. So it took many years for us to really curate vendors to give this service, because it's a very tricky service, right? Many of these services can have a very can result into very bad customer experience unless you really do a job which is top notch. Packers and movers, painting, cleaning, rental agreement, and so on. So I think middle of our journey we realized it. We also experimented a lot with it, lead generation or revenue generation, many models. But I think over years, then now we have become very good at it.
And what were the services, if you can share the broad spectrum, which you know, and currently what's the share of revenue between the whole bouquet of services that you offer?
So our majority of the revenue, 50-60 percentage of our revenue comes from the core real estate business. Then then comes the home services, which basically forms under 30 percentage of the revenue, which is about right everything, right from home loan to insurance to furniture to rental agreement, everything which is basically related to home services that we do. And then we also basically make 10-20 percentage money from the financial services, which is rent payment, home insurance, and home loan. So now we have these four big verticals, which is financial services, home services, no brokerhood, which is a Western Gate Management app, and the core real estate, which basically drives all of these businesses.
And what made you come into no brokerhood when there was, you know, MyGate, Apna Complex, and it was so much competition in that space?
Yeah,
Why
so
did
I
it
think
make sense to no broker core offering?
so. I even the core no broker had a lot of competition when we started it. So there is rarely ever a good field which has no competition. So no brokerhood comes very naturally to us because this is a business in which you deal directly with the apartment residents, who are our eventual customers anyway, and this is a good way for us to connect with the customers who are using us for their rental and for their buy and sell needs, and this is how we basically remain in their minds across the year rather than being just reminded once in a year or once in 2 years.
Got it. And but were the customers asking for no brokerhood at that point in time? Because that's the lens you use to build everything.
No, so of course this question was asked by customers, many of the customers, as to why are you not into this service. But we felt that we were so much focused on the, because every business takes a huge amount of bandwidth and focus, because you, if you don't do it right, then your core brand suffers. So building home services took a huge amount of focus of ours, and once we felt that we are good at it, then only we basically started moving.
Got it. And how, if you can share, you know, your approach has been as a founder from, and what has changed in you in the 0 to 1 journey, 1 to 10, and now 10 to 100.
So I think many in the 0 to 1 journey, we basically were much more focused on finding out whether which things are working. So experimenting again, failing again, and trying to figure out which things are working. Uh, so that's, and being very frugal basically made sense. Now when we are into the 1 to 100 journey, then it has to be a balance. We need to continue with our frugal tendencies, but we also need to invest a lot because we want to grow a lot. And so what worked in the 0 to 1 stage will not necessarily work in the 1 to 100 stage. In 0 to 1 stage, we three founders contributed much more to how no broker is moving, what no broker is doing. Now in the 1 to 100 stage, we contribute much less, and the team which is basically working with us, they act more like mini entrepreneurs running their own businesses with a very high amount of independence, accountability, and very little oversight from us. Because that's because many investors ask us as to how is it that you are able to do so many businesses, isn't it confusing, isn't it a loss of focus? And our answer is that that for every business you need an entrepreneur. And the advantage of having three entrepreneurs is that you can have more entrepreneurs within them. And if you take people who are better than you and give them huge amount of freedom, uh, then they do it with full passion. They do it with full fun and with huge amount of hard work. So I believe that today, wherever No Broker is, and we have more than 1.2 crore customers, we have more than half a crore property listings posted on No Broker site till now. So in terms of numbers, we are pretty large, and but I would say 90% of the credit goes to the team which has done this in the past couple of years. Our credit is only in the first 1 year when we established the concept.
And there was an incident when your offices were vandalized by brokers, right? Was it a validation for you? Now you have reached product market fit, or how did you take it?
So today, today when I tell the incident, it is seen as, yeah, it's a validation, and this is a very good example of how no brokerage is working. But at all of that is basically now in hindsight. At that point of time, it was a huge pain. It was huge inconvenience and trouble for the company, because suddenly one day when we were basically in this house which I told you earlier that we had rented on, we were working, and there were some 80 to 100 employees. That our company was big at that point of time, and suddenly we see some 60 70 brokers standing in front of the house, and trying to break in, trying to basically break laptops, trying to scare female employees, uh, because they wanted the company to be shut, because many of the customers told them that they will first check on no broker, and if they don't get the property, then they will go to the broker, which basically irritated them. And then, of course, basically the police got involved, but we did not get much support. And then those brokers basically started chasing the female employees late in the evening towards their home, started damaging the bikes which were parked outside. So it became inhabitable, and we had to almost overnight we had to vacate the house. And even when we were vacating, many brokers chased the vehicle as to where is it that now they are going. So we were without any office. We had to disconnect the customer care phone number. Of course, the website running also had disruptions. And then we searched for offices. You can't find a working office overnight. And then we had to split the team into two portions and somehow manage for the next 2.5 months. So huge service disruption. But now, yes, when we look at the hindsight, it made the team very strong. It suddenly gave the feeling towards to the team that we are doing something which is good, and we are not just part of another company. And the customers also have a habit of just using the service, liking it, but they don't come out on social media and talk about it, right? If you're unhappy with something, you come to social media and talk about it. But generally, if you're happy, you're just happy. You tell your friends, but you don't come on social media. But at that point of time, we were so overwhelmed by so many customers posting on social media saying that they are in support of us, etc., which basically also made us very proud. And I remember Teru coming to our office from BNX and basically saying, "Hey, this is going to make you strong." And I was like, "How will this make us strong?" It's such a pain. But he was right, and it did make the team strong.
Thank you so much, Amit, for sharing your journey. It's been wonderful to hear you, to learn the no broker journey heart to heart from you, and to see how it has evolved uh, into now it's no longer, I think, a startup, it's a household name.
So we would like to believe that, but yeah, still a long way to go. Uh, we would one day we would like to be a household name the way in which many of the other established companies are. Real estate is indeed a difficult business to crack, and especially the C2C market takes a very long time. When you have broker-led model, you can quickly make a website. You can get brokers to post properties for free, etc., etc., and you can build attraction pretty quickly. But getting a customer to customer site is very time consuming, and that's why it took us so many years to basically reach where we are. But let's basically hope that we will continue to put hard work and do the best for the customers.